Hey there, friends. Welcome back to our channel, where we share stories that tug at your heart and keep you hooked. Today, we're diving into an incredible tale called Twins Torn Apart, a story packed with love, loss, and a family's unbreakable bond. It's got mystery, emotion, and a journey you won't forget. So grab a cozy blanket, hit that like button, and let's get started with the first chapter of this amazing story. Summer 1995 wrapped Portland, Oregon in a warm, golden glow. A cozy craftsman house sat on a quiet street, its porch swing creaking softly. Inside, Emily Carter, a high school English teacher with a laugh like a summer breeze, was 8 months pregnant with twins. Her belly stretched her sundresses tight, and she'd rest her hands there, feeling the kicks. Her husband, John, a lanky software engineer who always had a wrench handy, spent evenings in the nursery sanding 2 cribs he'd built from scratch. They'd chosen names, Jack for the older twin, Jake for his little brother. The room smelled of fresh paint, with tiny blue overalls folded neatly waiting for their boys. In the rocking chair, Emily read poetry aloud, her voice soft. "You two are going to love this world," she'd say, smiling. John, leaning in the doorway, would grin. "And I'm teaching you both to fix cars." They pictured park picnics, matching strollers, and cheering at Little League games. Neighbors dropped off baby clothes, and Emily's students stitched a quilt with bright stars. Life was simple. John coded apps, Emily graded essays, but it felt like a dream. At their last ultrasound, the technician pointed to 2 heartbeats. Identical. "Twins," she said. Tears sparkled in Emily's eyes as she squeezed John's hand. July rolled in, sticky and hot. Contractions hit Emily at dawn, and John sped her to the community hospital, his old pickup rattling. The delivery dragged on, hours of pain. Sweat soaked Emily's face as she gripped John's hand, until a nurse shouted, "Here's the first!" A sharp cry filled the room. Jack, red-faced and strong. Minutes later, Jake's softer wail followed. Nurses wrapped them in blankets, pointing out a teardrop-shaped birthmark on each boy's wrist. "Like little tattoos," one chuckled. Emily held them close, her heart bursting, then passed out from exhaustion. Sent to the waiting room, John paced, desperate to see his sons. Hours later, a nurse shook Emily awake, her face grim. "Mrs. Carter, I'm so sorry," she said. "Your older boy, Jack, didn't make it. Oxygen issue." A scream tore from Emily's throat, raw and shattering. She begged to see him, clutching the sheets, but the nurse shook her head. "It's been taken care of." Called in, John froze, his face crumpling. "What do you mean taken care of?" he snapped. The hospital handed over a vague report, complications, sudden loss, and a sealed file. Emily sobbed, her body shaking. John slammed his fist into a wall, knuckles bleeding. They left with Jake, tiny in his car seat, the empty crib at home, like a knife in their chest. Behind the scenes, a dark deal had unfolded. In Seattle, Richard and Margaret Hayes, a wealthy couple with a big house but no kids, had paid $100,000 to a shady hospital administrator. Hungry for cash, he teamed up with 2 nurses to pick a healthy newborn. Jack, with his dark curls and loud cry, was their choice. While Emily slept and John waited, they slipped Jack out, forging papers to claim he'd died. By nightfall, Jack was in Seattle, handed to the Hayeses as their adopted son, Ethan. The Carters, lost in grief, had no clue they'd been betrayed. Weeks dragged by. Emily barely left bed, staring at Jake's crib, picturing Jack beside him. John threw himself into work, but his eyes were empty. They held a quiet memorial, scattering ashes the hospital provided. Ashes they'd later learn weren't Jack's. Neighbors brought lasagna, but words fell flat. Emily framed the ultrasound photo, 2 blurry shapes side by side, and set it on the mantel. "We'll always love you, Jack," she'd whisper. Jake grew, a quiet baby with his mother's smile, but the house felt heavy, like it was holding a secret. Time marched on, and the Carters poured their love into Jake. By 2015, he was 20, a tall sophomore at the University of Oregon, chasing a graphic design degree. With John's dark eyes and Emily's dreamer spirit, He was always sketching in a beat-up notebook. Weekends, he helped at Carter's Crumbs, the family bakery where Emily's cinnamon rolls were a local legend. The place was warm, with checkered floors and a bell that jingled. Jake loved the bustle. Kids licking frosting, old folks swapping. Stories, but he carried a quiet weight. When he was little, Emily had sat him down, showing him the ultrasound. "You had a twin brother," she said, voice soft. "Jack didn't make it, but he's part of you." Jake kept the photo in his wallet, faded but sacred. He'd rubbed the teardrop birthmark on his wrist, wondering if Jack's matched. John, still raw, would look at Jake and see double. "Your brother would have been your best friend," he'd say, voice rough. The hospital's story never sat right with John. Something was off, he'd mutter, but evidence was gone, buried in time. For Jake, Jack was a shadow, a what-if that followed him. He'd lie awake, imagining a twin who'd sneak him snacks or race him across the park. At the bakery, he'd doodle two boys running through Portland's rainy streets, their laughs mixing. Emily caught him once, her eyes misty. "You're enough, Jake," she said, pulling him close. But Jake couldn't shake the feeling. What if Jack was out there? It was a crazy thought, a kid's wish, but it glowed like a spark in the dark. One spring evening, Jake leaned on the bakery counter, sketching a logo for school. The bell jingled, and Mrs. Larson, a regular with a knit scarf, shuffled in. "Jake, I swear I saw your twin in Seattle," she said, chuckling. "Same face, same curly hair, you hiding a brother?" Jake grinned, waving it off, but her words stuck like glue. Pulling the ultrasound from his wallet, he stared at the two shapes. Could Jack be alive? The idea was wild, impossible, but it took root, a seed ready to sprout. The spring air at Carter's Crumbs carried the sweet scent of cinnamon rolls, but Jake couldn't shake Mrs. Larson's words. A twin in Seattle. It sounded like a joke, but the ultrasound photo in his wallet felt heavier now. He flipped through, his sketches landing on one of two boys chasing kites, their curls bouncing. Shaking his head, he shoved the notebook aside. "Get real," he muttered, wiping down the counter. But the spark had caught, and it wasn't going out. A week later, Jake piled into a van with his college buddies for a camping trip at Mount Hood National Forest. Pine trees towered over the winding road, and the air was crisp, laced with wood smoke. His friend Mia, a photography major with a knack for trouble, blasted music from her phone. "This is going to be epic," she said, tossing him a marshmallow. Jake grinned, but his mind wandered to the ultrasound tucked in his backpack. The forest stretched wide, a patchwork of green and shadow, and their campsite buzzed with laughter as they pitched tents. That night, around a crackling campfire, Mia leaned in, her eyes glinting. "Saw your clone today, Jake," she said, smirking. "Same face, same curly hair, over at the next campsite." The group erupted, teasing about secret siblings. "Yeah, right," Jake scoffed, tossing a stick into the flames. But Mia wasn't done. She pulled out her phone, showing a shaky TikTok she'd filmed. A guy in a red hoodie, maybe 20, laughing with friends. The profile was blurry, but the husky jawline, the curls, hit Jake like a punch. "Coincidence," he said, voice tight. But his heart raced. Back in Portland, the video haunted him. He replayed it, zooming in, but the guy's face stayed just out of focus. Life at the bakery kept him busy, pouring coffee, boxing pastries. But his mind drifted. One rainy afternoon he ducked into a downtown coffee shop, sketchbook in hand. The barista, a girl with purple streaks in her hair, slid his latte across the counter. "Here you go, Ethan," she said, then blinked. "Oh, sorry. Thought you were someone else." Jake froze, coffee burning his hand. "Ethan, who's that?" The barista shrugged. "Just a regular, looks just like you." Heart pounding, Jake sat down, the tick-tock flashing in his mind. Ethan. A name, a face, a maybe. He pulled out his phone, texting Mia. "That guy in your video, any chance his name's Ethan?" She replied with a shrug emoji, but promised to ask around. Jake stared at the ultrasound, the two shapes side by side. What if Jack hadn't died? The thought was nuts, but it clung to him like damp clothes. He needed answers, even if they led nowhere. That night, sprawled on his bed, Jake scrolled Instagram, the rain tapping his window. On a whim, he posted Mia's TikTok, captioning it, "Anyone know this guy? Looks weirdly like me." Friends flooded the comments with jokes. "Clone alert, you got a twin, bro?" But one message stopped him cold. His classmate Tyler wrote, "Dude, that's Ethan Hayes. Goes to UW in Seattle. Total doppelganger." Jake's breath caught. Seattle. Mrs. Larson's comment echoed, and now this. He clicked Ethan's profile, public but sparse. Same height, same curls, same crooked smile. It was like staring in a mirror. Sleep didn't come easy. Jake tossed, picturing a guy who might be Jack living just a few hours away. By morning, he'd made up his mind. He messaged Ethan, "Hey, this is random, but we look super alike. I saw a video of you at Mount Hood. Want to meet up? Maybe grab coffee and laugh about it?" He hit send, palms sweaty. Hours later, Ethan replied, "Whoa, that's wild. Sure, let's meet. Seattle work?" Jake stared at the screen, a mix of nerves and hope bubbling up. This could be nothing or everything. At the bakery, Jake couldn't focus, burning a batch of scones. Emily noticed, her brow furrowing. "You okay, honey?" she asked, wiping flour off her hands. Jake hesitated, then spilled it all. Mrs. Larson, the TikTok, the barista, Ethan. "He looks like me, Mom, like exactly. What if—" He trailed off, the ultrasound burning a hole in his pocket. Emily's face paled, her hands trembling. "Jake, don't get your hopes up," she said, voice soft. But John, overhearing, set down his coffee mug, eyes sharp. "Tell me about this Ethan guy. Everything." Huddled in the bakery's back room, the air thick with sugar and tension, Jake showed them the video. John leaned in, his jaw tight. "That hospital never added up," he said, voice low. "The way they gave us the ashes." Emily touched the ultrasound frame on the wall, tears welling. "If there's a chance, we have to know." Jake nodded, resolve hardening. "I'm meeting him Saturday. You guys should come." John exchanged a glance with Emily. "We're in," he said, gripping Jake's shoulder. Saturday morning was a blur of nerves. Jake packed his backpack, the ultrasound tucked inside, and climbed into the minivan with John and Emily. The drive to Seattle was quiet, the highway cutting through misty forests. Jake fiddled with his phone, rereading Ethan's TikTok messages. What if Ethan was just a look-alike? Or worse, what if he was Jack and didn't want to know them? Emily reached back, squeezing his hand. "Whatever happens, we're together," she said. John nodded, eyes on the road. "Let's go and find out who this kid is." Seattle's skyline loomed as they pulled into Pike Place Market, where they'd agreed to meet. The air smelled of salt and coffee, vendors shouting over the crowd. Jake scanned the bustling plaza, his pulse thumping. Then he saw him, Ethan, in a green jacket, leaning against a lamp post. Same dark curls, same lanky frame. Their eyes locked, and Jake's breath hitched. It wasn't just a resemblance. It was like looking at himself, alive and breathing, across a crowded street. The air at Pike Place Market buzzed with the hum of vendors hawking flowers and the sharp tang of roasted coffee. Jake stood rooted, staring across the cobblestones at Ethan Hayes. Same dark curls, same lanky build, same jawline. Ethan's leaning forward, laughing at a street musician, Ethan's green jacket flapping in the breeze, oblivious to Jake's gaze. Heart thumping, Jake's feet moved before his brain caught up, weaving through the crowd. "Ethan!" he called, voice cracking. Ethan turned, eyes widening as they locked on Jake's face. For a second, the market's noise faded, and it was just them, two reflections in a fractured mirror. "Whoa," Ethan said, stepping closer, a grin breaking the tension. "You weren't kidding about the TikTok. We're like twins." Jake laughed, nervous, but warm, scratching his neck. "Yeah, it's freaky, right?" They stood there, sizing each other, taking in the identical curls, the way their smiles tilted left. Jake's eyes caught a glimpse of Ethan's wrist, a teardrop, birthmark just like his own. His breath hitched, and his stomach flipped. You want to grab something to eat? Talk this out?" Ethan nodded, slinging his backpack over one shoulder. "Burgers sound good?" At a diner nearby, all neon lights and sticky tables, the two slid into a booth, burgers piled high with fries. Conversation flowed easy, like they'd been buddies forever. Jake spilled about Portland, sketching at Carter's Crumbs, and sneaking extra frosting when his mom wasn't looking. Ethan, polished but laid back, talked about growing up in Seattle's ritzy suburbs where his parents, Richard and Margaret Hayes, owned half the waterfront. "They adopted me," Ethan said, dipping a fry in ketchup, "from a hospital back in '95. Never knew my birth parents." Jake's fork froze, the words landing like a punch. 1995? Portland? Swallowing hard, Jake set his burger down. That's when I was born. Same hospital." He hesitated, then spilled it, the story of Jack, the twin who didn't make it. His mom's tears, his dad's doubts, the ultrasound he carried like a talisman. Ethan leaned back, eyes narrowing. "Hold up. You're saying your brother died, and I look like you? That's wild." He rubbed his wrist, the birthmark peeking out again. "This mark? We've both got it. What are the odds?" Jake's hand shook a bit, shaky. "I don't know, man, but it's not just looks. It's like you're him." The diner's jukebox kicked on, some old rock tune, but Jake barely heard it. He pulled out his phone, hands fumbling, and FaceTimed. "Emily, Mom, you gotta see this guy," he said, angling the screen. Ethan waved, half awkward, half curious. Emily's gasp crackled through the speaker, her face going pale. "John!" she called, voice trembling. John's face appeared, his eyes squinting at Ethan. "Holy, he looks just like you, Jake," he said, voice rough. Emily's hand covered her mouth, tears spilling. "That birthmark. Jake, is that on his wrist?" Jake nodded, throat tight. "Yeah, Mom, same as mine." John's voice cut in, firm. "We're driving up. Stay there." Ethan raised an eyebrow, glancing at Jake. "Your parents are intense, huh?" Jake managed a laugh, but his mind raced. "They've been through a lot. If you know, Jack, it's huge." Ethan ran a hand through his curls, looking uneasy. "This is a lot, man. I've got parents, the Hayeses. But, yeah, let's figure this out." The waitress refilled their sodas, but the food sat untouched, the air thick with what-ifs. By dusk, John and Emily pulled up outside the diner, their minivan's tires crunching gravel. Emily burst out, her coat flapping, and stopped short when she saw Ethan. Her hand flew to her chest, eyes locked on his face. "Oh, my God," she whispered, stepping closer. John followed, his jaw tight, staring at Ethan like he was seeing a ghost. Ethan stood, hands in his pockets, unsure. Hi," he said, glancing at Jake for backup. Emily's eyes filled, her voice barely a whisper. "You're Jack! You have to be!" She pointed to his wrist, trembling. "That mark, my boys both had it." John cleared his throat, trying to stay steady. "We need to talk. All of us." Ethan nodded, but his eyes flicked to the street, like he wanted to bolt. Jake touched his arm. "It's okay, man. We're not here to freak you out." They piled into the van, heading to the Hayes' mansion on Seattle's waterfront. The house loomed, all glass and steel, a far cry from the Carters' cozy Portland. Home. Richard and Margaret Hayes greeted them, polished and wary, their smiles tight. "What's this about?" Richard asked, ushering them into a sleek living room. Emily clutched the ultrasound photo, her voice shaking but clear. "We lost a son in '95. Jack. Same hospital you adopted Ethan from. Look at them." She held up the photo, then pointed to Jake and Ethan side by side. Margaret's hand tightened on her wineglass, her eyes darting to Ethan. "We adopted him legally," she said, voice sharp. "Papers, everything." John leaned forward, his voice low. "Papers can lie. We need a DNA test. Richard scoffed, but Ethan cut in, his voice quiet. Mom, Dad, I want to know. Let's do it. The room went still, the weight of the moment pressing down. Ethan looked at Jake, then at the Carters, his face a mix of fear and hope. If I'm your son, what does that mean? He asked Emily. Tears streamed down her face as she reached for his hand, stopping short. It means you're loved, always have been. Jake felt a lump in his throat, watching his mom's heart break and mend at once. John pulled out his phone, searching for a lab. We'll get answers, he said, voice firm. No more secrets. As they left the mansion, the Seattle skyline glittered, but the air felt heavy. Jake walked Ethan to his car, the two lingering under a streetlight. This is crazy, right? Ethan said, kicking a pebble. Jake nodded, managing a smile. Yeah, but maybe it's the good kind of crazy. Ethan glanced at the ultrasound. Jake held, then at his own wrist. If I'm Jack, I want to know you guys. Jake clapped his shoulder, feeling a spark of something new, hope maybe, or brotherhood. We'll figure it out, man, together. Driving back to their hotel, the Carters were quiet, the ultrasound on Emily's lap. Jake stared out the window. Ethan's face burned into his mind. The DNA test was a step, but what if it confirmed everything? What if Jack was alive, living a life they'd never known? The questions swirled, but one thing was clear. They were closer to the truth than ever, and nothing would stop them now. The Seattle skyline faded in the minivan's rearview mirror, its light smudging against the rainy night. Emily clutched the ultrasound photo, her fingers tracing the two shapes, her eyes distant. John gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles pale while Jake stared out the window. Ethan's face, his own face, burned into his mind. The hotel's neon sign flickered as they pulled in, the silence heavy. We're so close, Emily whispered, voice thick. Jake nodded, his throat tight. A DNA test was just a swab away, but it felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. What if Ethan was Jack? What then? Morning brought a gray drizzle, matching the knot in Jake's stomach. The Carters drove to a clinic near downtown, a squat building with humming fluorescents. Ethan was already there, leaning against a wall, hands stuffed in his jacket. He gave Jake a half smile, but his eyes were nervous, darting to John and Emily. Didn't sleep much, he admitted. Rubbing his neck, Jake clapped his shoulder, trying to lighten the mood. Same. Let's do this and grab some pancakes. After. Emily's hand trembled as she signed the forms, her gaze fixed on Ethan's wrist, the teardrop birthmark a quiet promise. The technician, a woman with a brisk nod, swabbed their cheeks. Jake, Ethan, Emily, John. Results in a week, she said, sealing the samples. A week felt like forever. But there was no rushing science. Outside, rain pattered on their umbrellas as they huddled by the van. What do we do now? Ethan asked, his voice low. John cleared his throat. We wait, and we talk. Emily touched Ethan's arm, soft but sure. Come to Portland, see? Our home. No pressure, just get to know us. Ethan hesitated, then nodded. Okay, I'd like that. Back in Portland, the bakery's bell jingled as usual, but Jake's world felt tilted. He and Ethan texted nonstop, swapping dumb memes and stories about high school pranks. They liked the same music, grunge bands, old-school hip-hop, and hated pickles on burgers. Weird how we're the same, Ethan wrote, adding a laughing emoji. Jake grinned, but each ping from his phone carried weight. If Ethan was Jack, it wasn't just a brother he'd gain. It was 20 years stolen, a whole life rewritten. John, meanwhile, couldn't let the hospital's story rest. Over coffee at Carter's Crumbs, he called an old friend Mike, a private investigator who owed him a favor. Something's fishy about 95, John said, voice low so Emily wouldn't hear. Dig into that hospital, anything you can find. Mike promised to poke around, starting with old records. Emily noticed John's hushed calls but didn't press. She was too busy watching Jake, her heart aching and hopeful. At night, she'd sit with the ultrasound, whispering, "Jack, are you coming home?" Ethan visited Portland that weekend, pulling up in a sleek car that screamed Seattle money. The bakery was packed, kids smearing frosting, locals chatting over muffins. Jake waved him in, tossing him an apron. "You're on dish duty, city boy," he teased. Ethan laughed, rolling up his sleeves, and the two fell into an easy rhythm, scrubbing pans and sneaking cookie dough. Emily watched from the counter, her eyes misty. Ethan's laugh, his quick grin. It was Jake's, but it was Jack's too, the son she'd lost. After closing, the Carters brought Ethan home, their craftsman house warm with lamplight. Over pizza, they swapped stories, John's bad fishing, trips, Emily's classroom disasters. Ethan opened up about the Hayes', their big house, their expectations. "They're great, but it's like I'm playing a part sometimes," he said, picking at his crust. Jake nudged him. "You fit here, man, birthmark and all." Ethan smiled, but his eyes flickered with doubt, caught between two worlds. The DNA results came on a Tuesday, the clinic's email pinging John's phone during breakfast. Emily froze, her coffee mug trembling. Jake grabbed his hand, his pulse racing. "Open it, Dad!" John clicked, eyes scanning the screen, then let out a shaky breath. "It's—" "Match. Ethan's your brother, Jake, our son." Emily sobbed, pulling Jake into a hug, her tears soaking his shirt. "Jack's alive," she whispered over and over. Jake's eyes stung, relief and shock mixing. Ethan was Jack. His twin was real, they called Ethan, catching him between classes. "At UW? You're Jack," Jake said, voice cracking. "DNA says so." A long pause crackled through the line. "Wow." Ethan finally said, soft, I don't know what to say." Emily took the phone, her voice gentle. "Come back. Honey, we want you here." Ethan agreed, but his tone was heavy, like he was carrying both names, Ethan Hayes and Jack Carter, unsure which fit. That night, John met Mike at a diner, away from Emily's ears. Mike slid a folder across the table, his face grim. "Found something." That hospital had a shady administrator in '95, guy named Carl Webb. Rumors of a baby-selling ring, but it got buried. "Your kid's case fits the pattern." John's fists clenched, anger flaring. "Keep digging," he said. "I want names." Mike nodded, warning him to stay calm. This could get ugly. John didn't care. Someone had stolen his son, and he'd tear the truth apart to find out who. Jake couldn't sleep, his phone glowing with Ethan's texts. "What's it like having a family like yours?" Ethan asked. Jake typed back, "Loud, messy, but they're home. You'll see." He pulled out the ultrasound, tracing the shapes. Ethan Jack wasn't just a twin. He was a piece of Jake, a missing half now found. But what did Jack want? To stay Ethan, with his fancy life, or to be a Carter, slinging? Pastries in Portland? Emily, meanwhile, started a scrapbook, pasting photos of Jake and the ultrasound, leaving space for Jack. She'd catch herself staring at Jake, seeing double, her heart mending and breaking. "We'll make this right," she told John, her voice fierce. John nodded, but his mind was on Mike's folder. The hospital's lies were unraveling, and he'd follow the trail no matter where it led. By Friday, Ethan was back in Portland, standing in the bakery's doorway, his backpack slung low. Jake grinned, tossing him a muffin. "Ready to be a Carter for a day?" Ethan caught it, his smile cautious, but real. "Maybe more than a day," he said, glancing at Emily, who pulled him into a hug. The bell jingled, customers streaming in, but for a moment it was just them. Two brothers, two parents, and a truth that changed everything. The road ahead wasn't clear, but they'd walk it together, one step at a time. The bell at Carter's Crumbs jingled as Ethan stepped into the warm glow of the bakery, his backpack slung low. Portland's autumn rain drummed outside, but inside the air smelled of sugar and coffee. Emily's hug wrapped him tight, her apron dusted with flour, and Jake tossed him a muffin with a grin. "Welcome to the chaos," Jake said, nodding at the crowded tables. Ethan caught the muffin, his smile hesitant but real, like he was testing the ground beneath him. For a moment, the bustle faded, and it was just them. A family piecing itself back together, one shaky step at a time, days blended into a rhythm. Ethan, still Ethan to himself, but Jack to the Carters, stayed in their guest room, its walls lined with Jake's old band posters. Mornings meant bakery shifts, where Ethan learned to pipe frosting and dodge Emily's playful swats when he snuck bites of dough. Jake taught him the register, their banner, quick and easy, like they'd grown up sharing secrets. "You're a natural," Jake said, elbowing him after Ethan charmed a customer into buying extra cookies. Ethan shrugged, but his eyes lit up, a spark of belonging flickering. At night, over takeout in the Carters' cozy living room, stories flowed. Emily shared memories of Jake as a kid, his crayon murals, his obsession with fire trucks. Ethan listened, quiet, tracing the teardrop birthmark on his wrist. "What was I like as a baby?" he asked, voice soft. Emily's eyes softened, her voice catching. "You were loud, always kicking. Jack was our fighter." Ethan nodded, the name Jack feeling both foreign and right, like a jacket he wasn't sure fit. Jake sensed Ethan's tug of war. Late one night, sprawled on the guest room floor with a pizza box between them, he nudged Ethan. "You don't have to choose, you know. Ethan, Jack, whatever. You're my brother." Ethan stared at the ceiling, his voice low. "The Hayes raised me. Big house, private school, but it's like I was always borrowed. You guys feel real, but what do I tell them?" Jake didn't have answers, but he stayed, the silence comfortable, their bond growing like roots. John, meanwhile, burned with purpose. Mike, the private investigator, called with a lead. Over burgers at a greasy spoon, Mike slid over grainy photos of Carl Webb, the hospital's old administrator, now living in Nevada. "Webb ran a baby-selling ring," Mike said, voice low. "Your boy wasn't the only one. Cops ignored it back then. Too much money involved." John's jaw tightened, his coffee going cold. "Find him," he said. "And anyone else who touched my son." Mike warned him to stay cool, but John's anger simmered, a fire he couldn't douse. Emily tried to focus on the present, baking with Ethan and Jake, but the past clawed at her. She'd catch Ethan's laugh, so like Jake's, and tear up, imagining 20 years of missed birthdays. One evening, she showed Ethan the scrapbook, Jake's baby photos, the ultrasound, blank pages waiting for him. "You're part of us," she said, her hand on his. Ethan swallowed hard, his voice barely audible. "I want to be." But his phone buzzed with texts from Margaret Hayes, her worry clear. "When are you coming home?" Ethan didn't reply, torn between two families. The investigation broke open when Mike tracked down a retired nurse, Clara Evans, living in Tacoma. John drove to meet her, Jake tagging along the highway, humming under their tires. Clara's house was small, cluttered with cat figurines, her hands shaking as she poured tea. "I didn't want to," she said, eyes wet. "Webb made us. Took your boy for $100,000. Gave him to a couple in Seattle. I kept quiet, but it's eaten me alive." Jake's stomach churned, picturing Ethan, Jack as a baby, stolen in the night. John's voice was steel. Who else knew? Clara named 2 nurses, long gone, and Webb as the mastermind. Back home, John told Emily, keeping his voice steady for her sake. Her face crumpled, but anger flared in her eyes. "They took our baby," she said, gripping the ultrasound. "We're getting justice." Jake, shaken, texted Ethan, "Found something big. Hospital was dirty. Call me." Ethan replied fast, on off he my way. By dusk, he was back at the Carters, his face pale as Jake filled him in. "So I was sold?" Ethan asked, voice hollow. Jake nodded, his hand on Ethan's shoulder. "But you're here now. That's what matters." The Carters met with Detective Sarah Lopez, a no-nonsense cop with a thick file on Webb. In her cramped office, she spread out documents, bank transfers, forged records. "Clara's talking, and we're building a case," Lopez said. "Webb's in Nevada, but we'll get him. Your story's just the start. Dozens of families got hit. Emily's voice shook. Dozens? How'd they get away with it? Lopez sighed. Money, power, but not this time. John leaned forward, eyes fierce. What about the Hayeses? They paid for our son. Lopez noted it, promising to dig. Ethan, quiet till now, spoke up. The Hayeses didn't know, did they? Lopez's face softened. We'll find out. But you're a victim here, kid. Ethan nodded, but his eyes were distant, grappling with a life built on lies. Outside, rain soaked the parking lot as the Carters piled into the van. Ethan lagged behind, staring at his phone. A photo of him with the Hayeses at a gala, all smiles. Jake nudged him. You okay? Ethan shoved the phone away, his voice tight. Just need time. That night, the Carters sat Ethan down in the living room, lamplight casting soft shadows. Emily took his hand, her voice steady. You're Jack, but you're Ethan too. We won't take that away. John nodded, his anger softening. We want you, son, however you come. Ethan's eyes glistened, and he managed a small smile. Thanks. I want to stay, at least for a while. Jake grinned, tossing a pillow at him. Good, 'cause you're on muffin duty tomorrow. The week ended, Lopez called with news. Webb was spotted in Reno, and the police were closing in. The Carters felt a shift, like the ground steadying beneath them. Ethan started sketching with Jake, their pencils scratching in sync, drawing two boys under a starry sky. This is us, right? Ethan asked, pointing to the sketch. Jake nodded, his throat tight. Yeah, man, always has been. The truth was out, but the road to healing was just beginning, and they'd face it as a family, no matter what came next. Autumn leaves swirled outside Carter's Crumbs, painting Portland streets in reds and golds. Inside, the bakery hummed with warmth, the scent of fresh muffins mixing with coffee. Ethan, Jack to the Carters, stood shoulder to shoulder with Jake piping frosting onto cupcakes, their laughter cutting through the morning rush. Emily watched from the counter, her heart swelling as their curls bounced in sync, like the twins she'd dreamed of. John, wiping down tables, caught her eye and smiled, a rare softness in his face. The truth about Ethan's past was raw, but here in the bakery's glow, they were building something new. Mornings at the Carters' house settled into a rhythm. Ethan claimed the guest room, his sneakers by the door, his sketchbook next to Jake's. Over cereal, the brothers traded jabs about who'd burned the toast worse, while Emily flipped pancakes, humming old tunes. John, usually quiet, started, telling dad jokes, making Ethan snort milk. You're stuck with us now, Jake said, grinning as Ethan rolled his eyes. The name Jack felt closer, like a song Ethan was learning the words to. But he still answered to both, navigating two lives. Afternoons meant exploring Portland. Jake dragged Ethan to Powell's Books, their arms full of comics, then to the riverfront, where they skipped rocks under a gray sky. This is where I'd come to think about you, Jake admitted, tossing a stone. Even when I didn't know you were real. Ethan's rock sank, his voice soft. I used to wonder about my birth family. Guess I found 'em. They stood. There, the water rippling, a silent promise forming. Brothers, no matter what. Emily poured her love into small things, teaching Ethan her cookie recipe, showing him Jake's old baby blanket, its edges frayed. One night she handed him a photo of her and John in '95, young and hopeful, her belly round with twins. We never stopped loving you, she said, her eyes bright. Ethan traced the photo, his throat tight. I'm sorry I wasn't here, he whispered. Emily hugged him, fierce and warm. You're here now, Jack. That's enough. John's focus stayed on justice. Detective Lopez called with updates. Carl Webb, the hospital's crooked administrator, was hiding in Reno, but the net was tightening. Mike, the private investigator, dug up more. Bank records linking Webb to the Hayeses' payment. They might not have known it was a crime, Mike said over coffee, his voice low. But they paid. John's fists clenched, his anger flaring. They had our kid for 20 years. They owe us answers. Lopez urged patience, but John was done waiting. Ethan wrestled with his ties to the Hayeses. Margaret texted daily, her messages a mix of love and worry. "We miss you, Ethan. Come home soon." Richard called, his voice clipped, asking when he'd stop this Portland thing. Ethan stared at their photos, memories of ski trips and gala dinners, clashing with the Carters' messy, real warmth. "What if I hurt them?" he asked Jake, sitting on the porch, the night air cool. Jake shrugged, his voice steady. "You're not picking sides. You're just you. They'll figure it out." The Hayeses drove to Portland unannounced, their sleek SUV pulling up outside the bakery. Margaret, in a tailored coat, hugged Ethan tightly, her eyes scanning him like he might vanish. Richard shook John's hand, stiff but polite. "We need to talk," Richard said, glancing at Emily. The Carters led them inside, the bakery closed for the day, its tables empty. Tension hung thick as coffee cooled in their mugs. "We didn't know," Margaret said, her voice breaking. "We paid an agency. They said it was legal." Emily's eyes flashed, but her voice stayed calm. "You raised our son. We're grateful, but we lost 20 years. John leaned forward, his voice hard. "Who'd you pay? Names." Richard hesitated, then named a contact. Webb's alias, tying it all together. Ethan, sitting between Jake and Margaret, looked torn, his hands twisting. "I love you guys," he said to the Hayeses, voice raw. "But I need this. My birth family. Can you let me have both?" Margaret nodded, tears falling, while Richard sighed, softening. "We'll try, son." The truce was fragile, but it held, a bridge between two worlds. To celebrate, Emily threw a party at the bakery, stringing lights and piling tables with pies. Neighbors crowded in, music blaring, kids darting between legs. Jake and Ethan manned the dessert table, their banter drawing laughs. "You're stealing my frosting game," Jake teased, smearing icing on Ethan's cheek. Ethan retaliated, their chase ending in a hug, the crowd cheering. Emily snapped photos, her scrapbook growing, while John watched, his anger easing in the glow of his sons. After the party, Jake and Ethan sat on the bakery's back steps, sharing a soda. Ethan pulled out his sketchbook, showing a drawing, two boys under a starry sky, hands linked. "This is us," he said, his voice firm. Jake grinned, adding a comet with his pencil. "Needs more flair." They laughed, their shoulders brushing, the bond solidifying. Ethan's phone buzzed. Lopez, asking him to meet. "Webb's in custody," she said. "We need your statement." Ethan's face tightened, but Jake nodded. "We got this, bro." The next morning, the Carters and Ethan drove to the police station, its fluorescent lights harsh. Lopez spread out photos, Webb handcuffed, his face gaunt. "He's talking," she said. "Confessed to selling dozens of kids, including you." Ethan's hands shook, but he spoke clearly, recounting his adoption, the Hayeses' story. Emily held his hand, her grip fierce, while John's eyes burned, fixed on Webb's photo. "What's next?" John asked. Lopez leaned back. "Trial, and we're contacting other families. This is big." Outside, the air felt lighter, like a storm had passed. Ethan turned to Jake, his voice steady. "I'm staying. Jack, Ethan." "Whatever. I'm your brother." Jake pulled him into a hug, their birthmarks brushing. "About time, man." Emily and John joined, a messy group hug under Portland's cloudy sky. The bakery's sign glowed in the distance, a beacon of home. Webb's trial loomed, and the Hayeses' role was unclear, but the Carters had their sons, and that was a start. Portland's cloudy sky hung low as the Carters and Ethan stepped out of the police station, the weight of Webb's arrest settling over them. The bakery's sign glowed in the distance, a quiet promise of home. Emily's arm looped through Ethan's, her grip steady, while Jake clapped his brother's shoulder, their birthmarks brushing in a silent vow. John trailed behind, his eyes on the horizon, where justice was finally taking shape. The van's engine rumbled as they drove back, the city's lights blurring past, each lost in thought about the trial ahead and the family they'd fought to rebuild. Winter crept into Portland, dusting the streets with frost. Carter's Crumbs stayed busy, its warmth a magnet for locals craving Emily's pies. Ethan, now splitting time between names, Jack with the Carters, Ethan with his past, threw himself into bakery life. He and Jake perfected a new cookie recipe, their flour dusted, hands moving in sync, their laughter filling the kitchen. "You're stealing my thunder," Jake teased, flicking dough at Ethan. Ethan dodged, grinning, his ease growing, like he'd always belonged. At home, the brothers claimed the living room for late-night jam sessions, Jake strumming a guitar, while Ethan tried harmonica, their off-key notes making Emily giggle. She'd sit with her scrapbook, adding snapshots, Ethan icing cupcakes, Jake teaching him to skateboard. "You're both trouble," she'd say, her eyes bright, the pain of 20 years softening. John, less gruff now, joined them, sharing stories of his college days, his pride in his sons clear. Ethan soaked it in, the words, Jack, feeling less like a stranger. The trial loomed, its shadow long. Detective Lopez called weakly, her voice clipped but hopeful. Webb, now in custody, had confessed to running a baby-selling ring implicating nurses and a web of payoffs. "Your case cracked it open," she told John over coffee at the bakery. "We've found 30 families so far." Emily's hand shook, her mug clinking. 30? All those kids? Lopez nodded, her face grim. "We're contacting them. You'll need to testify." John's jaw tightened. "What about the Hayeses? They paid." Lopez sighed. "No proof. They knew it was illegal. They're cooperating." Ethan wrestled with the news. He met Margaret and Richard at a Seattle cafe, the air tense but civil. Margaret's eyes were red, her voice soft. "We didn't know, Ethan. We just wanted you." Richard, stiff in his suit, added, "We're sorry for your birth family's pain." Ethan nodded, his heart torn. "I'm staying with the Carters," he said, voice firm, "but you're still you." Margaret hugged him, tears falling, and Richard offered a handshake, a silent truce. Ethan left feeling lighter, like he'd claimed both parts of himself. Testifying meant reliving the past. In a cold courtroom, John took the stand, his voice steady as he recounted 1995. The hospital's lies, the ashes that weren't Jack's. Emily followed, her words raw, describing the ultrasound she'd carried for 20 years. Ethan, as Jack Carter, spoke last, his voice quiet but clear. "I grew up as Ethan Hayes, but I'm Jack too. I just want the truth." Webb, gaunt in an orange jumpsuit, stared at the floor, his empire of secrets crumbling. The judge's gavel fell, guilty, with a sentence pending. The trial made headlines. Portland hospital scandal exposed. Reporters swarmed Carter's Crumbs, but the family kept them at bay, focusing on each other. Jake and Ethan started a project, a mural on the bakery's back wall, sketching two boys under a starry sky, their hands linked. Neighbors pitched in, kids adding messy stars, old-timers offering paint. "This is for you two," Emily said, her voice thick. As the mural grew, a symbol of reunion, John watched his anger fading, replaced by quiet pride. Healing came in small ways. Ethan enrolled at the University of Oregon, studying art with Jake, their dorm room a mess of sketchbooks and pizza boxes. They posted videos on YouTube, sharing their story, twin brothers torn apart, found again. Comments poured in, some from others searching for lost siblings. "You're giving us hope," one read. Ethan read it aloud, his voice catching. "We should help," he said. Jake nodded, an idea sparking. The Carters launched a fund, Twins Reunited, to support families hit by Webb's crimes. They hosted a fundraiser at the bakery, tables piled with donuts, a local band playing. Ethan and Jake manned a booth selling prints of their mural, the crowd's energy electric. Lopez stopped by, her smile rare. "You're making a difference," she said, handing them a list of families to contact. Emily hugged her, tears in her eyes. "This is for Jack, and all the others. John, quieter now, donated half the bakeries. Profits, his way of righting the past. One evening, the brothers sat on the bakery's roof, the city's lights twinkling below. Ethan pulled out his sketchbook, showing a new drawing, two boys, older now, laughing under the same stars. "This is us, right?" he asked, his voice soft. Jake grinned, adding a moon with his pencil. "Forever, man." They talked about the future, art shows, road trips, maybe finding others like them. Ethan's phone buzzed, a text from Margaret. "Proud of you." He smiled at peace with both names, both families. The trial's end brought closure. Webb got 25 years, his accomplices lesser sentences. The Hayeses faced no charges, their cooperation noted, but they sent the Carters a letter apologizing again. "We love Ethan," Margaret wrote. "Thank you for sharing him." Emily framed it, a reminder of grace. The fund grew, connecting 3 families already, their stories echoing the Carters. "We're not done," John said, his voice firm, as they planned outreach to more. Back at the bakery, life felt fuller. Ethan and Jake bickered over who'd clean the ovens, their laughter a melody. Emily baked a cake for their 21st birthday, 2 names piped in frosting, Jack and Jake. John lit the candles, his eyes misty. "To my boys," he said, voice rough. They blew out the flames, the room erupting in cheers, neighbors raising glasses. The mural outside gleamed, its stars bright against the night, a testament to what they'd overcome. As winter deepened, the Carters looked ahead. The fund needed work, the mural needed finishing, and the brothers had dreams to chase. But first they'd celebrate, together, whole, a family forged through pain and love. The bakery's warmth held them close, its bell jingling with promise, ready for whatever came next. Winter's chill settled over Portland, but Carter's Crumbs glowed like a beacon, its windows steamed from the heat of ovens and laughter. The mural on the back wall, 2 boys under a starry sky, hands linked, was nearly done, its colors bold against the brick. Ethan and Jake stood before it, paint cans at their feet, adding final touches, a comet here, a moon there. Neighbors stopped to admire, snapping photos, their kids pointing at the stars. Emily watched from the doorway, her apron tied loose, her heart full. John, hauling flour sacks, paused to nod, his pride quiet but deep. The bakery held them close, a home rebuilt from broken pieces. Spring brought their 21st birthday, a milestone doubled. The bakery buzzed with preparations, tables draped in checkered cloths, balloons bobbing. Emily baked a massive cake, pipe ink, 2 names in blue frosting, Jack and Jake. Ethan, now comfortable as Jack, but still tied to his past, helped Jake string fairy lights, their banter light. "You're hogging the ladder," Jake teased, nudging him. Ethan grinned, tossing a streamer. "Gotta make it perfect, bro." Neighbors poured in, bringing gifts. Socks, books, a goofy hat for each twin. The air hummed with music and chatter, a celebration of survival. John lit the candles, his voice rough but warm. "To my boys," he said, raising a glass. Emily's eyes shimmered, her hand on Ethan's shoulder. "You're our miracle," she whispered. The twins blew out the flames, their breaths mingling, the crowd cheering. Kids smeared frosting, old-timers swapped stories, and the Hayeses, invited as a gesture of peace, arrived quietly. Margaret hugged Ethan, her smile soft, while Richard shook John's hand, there past a shadow but no longer a wall. "Thank you," Margaret told Emily, voice low. Emily nodded, her grace a gift. The Twins Reunited Fund grew, its mission spreading. 5 families had reconnected, their stories echoing the Carters, stolen children now found. Ethan and Jake ran the fund's social media, posting updates on YouTube, their videos raw but real. "We're here to help," Ethan said in one, his voice steady, Jake nodding beside him. Comments flooded in, some from strangers, some from others still searching. "You guys are heroes," one read. Emily framed it, hanging it by the mural, a reminder of their purpose. One sunny afternoon, the brothers finished the mural, inviting the neighborhood to a reveal. A crowd gathered, kids clutching balloons, the mayor cutting a ribbon. Ethan and Jake unveiled it, the stars gleaming under a clear sky. "This is for us," Jake said, his arm around Ethan, "and for everyone who's lost someone." Applause erupted, cameras flashing. Emily snapped a photo, her scrapbook nearly full, while John stood tall, his anger replaced by hope. The mural wasn't just art, it was a vow to keep fighting. Life at the University of Oregon kept the twins busy. Their dorm was a chaos of art supplies and half-eaten pizza, their sketches taped to the walls. Ethan majored in art, Jake in design, their projects often blending, posters for the fund, logos for the bakery. They'd bicker over colors, then laugh, their bond unshakable. Weekends meant Portland, where they'd sling pastries at Carter's Crumbs, Emily's laughter, their soundtrack. "You're going to eat all the profits," she'd scold, swatting. Ethan's hand from the cookie jar. He'd grin, Jack and Ethan in perfect balance. The Hayes' visited monthly, their relationship with Ethan evolving. Margaret sent care packages, books, sweaters, while Richard offered business tips for the fund. "You're doing good, son," he said once, his voice gruff. Ethan hugged them, grateful for their love. But Portland was home. He'd sit with Emily, asking about her dreams for him as a baby, each story stitching him closer to Jack. John taught him to change a tire, their hands greasy, their silence comfortable. "You're a Carter," John said, clapping his back. Ethan smiled, the name fitting like a favorite shirt. The fund's first big win came that summer. A family in Idaho reunited with their daughter, sold by Webb's Ring in '96. The Carters hosted them at the bakery, their story a mirror of their own. The girl, now 19, hugged Ethan and Jake, her eyes wet. "You made this happen," she said. Jake grinned, but Ethan's voice caught. "We just opened the door." More families followed, each reunion a spark, and the fund's YouTube channel grew, its videos inspiring thousands. "Keep searching," Jake told viewers, his twin nodding. "Don't give up." One evening, the brothers climbed to the bakery's roof, the city's lights twinkling below. Ethan pulled out his sketchbook, showing a new drawing. Two men, older, standing under the same starry sky, their faces weathered but smiling. "This is us, years from now," he said, his voice soft. Jake added a tree with his pencil, its branches wide. "Still together, right?" Ethan nodded, their shoulders brushing. "Always, man." They sat there, the mural glowing behind. Them, its stars, a map of their journey. The Carters marked a year since Ethan's return with a quiet dinner at home, the table piled with Emily's lasagna. John raised a toast, his voice steady, to family found and fought for. Emily squeezed Ethan's hand, her scrapbook open, to a new page. A photo of the twins at the mural, grinning. "You're our home," she said. Jake and Ethan clinked. Glasses, their laughter filling the room, the past a scar, but no longer a wound. As summer faded, the fund planned a national campaign, aiming to reach more families. Ethan and Jake designed a logo, two linked stars like their mural, and pitched it to Lopez, who'd become a friend. "You're changing lives," she said, her smile wide. The bakery thrived, its mural a local landmark, drawing visitors who left notes of hope. The Carters, once broken, stood whole, their love a light that refused to dim. Under Portland's starry sky, the family gathered outside Carter's Crumbs, the mural shining. Ethan and Jake traced its lines, their birthmarks side by side. Emily leaned into John, her heart full, while the bell jingled behind them, a song of home. The road hadn't been easy, but they'd walked it together, and the future, bright, boundless, was theirs to shape. Wow, what a journey! The story of Jack, and Jake shows us that love and truth can overcome anything. What did you think of their incredible reunion? Drop your thoughts in below, and tell us your favorite moment. Those bakery scenes had us tearing up. Share this video with someone who loves a good story and give us a like if you're as moved as we are. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell to catch more tales that warm your heart and keep you inspired. Thanks for watching, friends. See you in the next one.